Senator, good morning. Thanks for joining us. There's so much to talk through with you, but let's begin right there with the idea that Bill Pulte, a man with no experience in intelligence whatsoever, will now oversee 18 intelligence agencies, at least on a temporary basis, as acting director of national intelligence. What concerns do you have about Bill Pulte?
Exactly the ones that you just articulated. No experience, absolutely no expertise in this highly sensitive and important area. In the 15 years that I've been in the United States Senate, what I've come to see is that there's no position in our national security system more important than the DNI. And remember why it exists. In the wake of 9/11, we found that our intelligence system was splintered, that different parts of it failed to communicate what they knew. And it not only put us at risk, it created one of the great tragedies in the history of the United States. So the DNI is a critical position, and to make it one of political loyalty, to politicize it, is absolutely to make America a lot less safe. In fact, to endanger our national security.
Senator, we're always thankful when you give us time, but the fact that you're here after a very lengthy vote-a-rama, I think, is notable. Overnight, obviously, Republicans ended up passing this immigration-focused funding package, but in the process of getting there, there were some really interesting amendment votes where amendments didn't pass, but certain Republicans raised eyebrows by voting for things like blocking that weaponization fund that the White House has been talking about, like trying to block the ballroom funding. What were the conversations on the floor that you overheard, either with or from your Republican counterparts? And what does the whole process tell you about where the party is right now?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, even on no sleep, or maybe especially on no sleep. I can't imagine a better way to begin the day. The conversations were extremely interesting and illuminating. I think that the Trump facade is beginning to break a little bit. They are plainly worried, deeply concerned about this election. Remember, these amendments put them on record voting to block our efforts to kill that slush fund, the $1.8 billion thug fund to aid the president's allies and friends, including convicted January 7th rioters. They went on record against blocking the immunity shield that the president will now have as a result of the deal that Branch negotiated on his tax returns. And so they are now part and parcel of the corruption of this government, and the kind of choices they had to make, I think, were deeply disconcerting to them. And that's the kind of conversation we had on the floor. A lot of gallows humor.
Yeah, which I think probably seeps in when you're doing these overnight votes anyway. But certainly there's a lot of moments where the White House has had sort of own goals, as I've heard Republicans talk about it, on members of its own party. But I would imagine that that slush fund that January 6th insurrectionists could take advantage of, Blanche has tried to say it's dead. The president has sort of kept it alive. And I would imagine, as someone who's on the Senate Judiciary Committee, that it's going to be a central piece of the confirmation battle for Blanche. Do you have any sense of when that confirmation battle is going to kick off and the ways that this might be important, especially as you have someone like Senator Thom Tillis on the Republican side who said that this was going to be a litmus test for him?
I think Blanche is going to have a tough time on confirmation. And we on the Judiciary Committee have a lot of difficult questions for him because he has shown he's going to be Donald Trump's lawyer, not the people's lawyer. I was the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut, and I know what it means to represent the government. I was the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut for 4.5 years. I know what it means to be part of the Justice Department. He has so degraded the standard and the ethics of the Justice Department in all he's done that served the president's interest. That deal on the president's tax immunity is absolutely abhorrent. And that's why I think even Republicans, whether it's Tillis or Cornyn, may have some difficulty. And, of course, they're a little bit more liberated than they were, partly because of the decision not to go in Tillis's case for re-election, partly because of defeat in Cornyn's case. But I think we're going to have a really tumultuous time for him in confirmation.
Are they liberated, though? I want to push back a little bit because you took a slew of votes over the past 24 hours, and in every turn, they were able to make sure that there was no legislative language outlawing this weaponization fund. In fact, one of the most critical votes came early on, and it was Bill Cassidy, someone who just was humiliated by Donald Trump in his own re-election bid, who cast the vote to make sure that that weaponization fund was not outlawed into law. You have a number of pressure points coming up. The Todd Blanche confirmation battle, whether or not to renew FISA and use that as leverage for this Bill Pulte nomination, potentially another war authorization vote just past the House around Iran. Do you have expectations that you will make headway with these Republicans when time and again, even those who are liberated tend to do what the party wants?
Well, I hope I said a little liberated.
A little liberated. Okay, fine.
Your pushback is well merited, and I have no expectations.
Okay.
To be really blunt, I've lived with the Trump leverage and fear for these past years, and every time I thought there might be a break, I have been disappointed and disillusioned, beginning with Mueller, going through the impeachment proceedings, when behind the scenes, they expressed deep concern and all the hand-wringing, all the eyebrows raised, but at the end of the day, they've succumbed to the Trump cult and fear. So I can't say I have any expectations.
Senator Blumenthal, we want to turn now to Ukraine. I know you just returned from a visit to that country. You were there during a particularly intense Russian bombardment. And even though Ukraine has certainly regained some of the momentum in that conflict, you know, Putin is still inflicting so much pain on the Ukrainian people. But this comes also as we saw the House defy President Trump and push forward a Ukraine aid package. Give us your sense as to its future in the Senate, but also what you hope it could do at the White House.
We're working very hard in the Senate for a bill that will impose scorching sanctions on Russia to stop its sales of oil and gas, the revenue it gains from those sales to countries that have been purchasing it over the years, are fueling its war machines. And the bill in the House passed by a bipartisan majority, 226 to 195. And I think that momentum will aid us in the Senate. The kind of military assistance provided in that bill is very important as well. I want to give a lot of credit to the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee there, Greg Meeks of New York, as well as Steny Hoyer of Maryland, another leader. But my trip to Ukraine showed me how desperate Putin is becoming. He is losing troops at a rate that is unsustainable, about 30,000 a month. He's losing territory at this point. His net losses, I think, have to be deeply troubling to him. And so out of desperation, I think he has launched this ferocious, bloody attack on Ukraine, literally on civilians. When we were there, we went into bomb shelters probably 3 or 4 times a day, sometimes 3:40 a.m. in the morning or in the midst of forums and conferences. So he is targeting homes, apartments, hospitals, schools out of desperation. But he is also having to contend with tremendous technology that the Ukrainians have developed. They're helping us. They're teaching us. But they're also using it to hit St. Petersburg oil depots deep within Russia. Tremendously impressive when you think about what it shows in vulnerability on the part of Russia. And that kind of technological advance, the prowess they're showing, has to be deeply troubling as well to Putin.
Senator Blumenthal, we also happen to be the United States, although the White House doesn't seem to want to talk about it much anymore. An active war with Iran right now. There's still shots being fired almost daily. So what is your assessment, given the intelligence you're aware of and the people you're able to have access to and speak with, about where these negotiations to end the war really are? We've heard these deadlines for 3.5 months now. It'll be 2 weeks. It'll be 4 weeks. It'll be 6 weeks. The war is complete. The war is over, said Marco Rubio of Operation Epic Fury a couple of days ago. What is your sense of actually where these negotiations are and how they might end?
I think the negotiations are at a standstill. Frankly, there is a war. In name only, I think there's a ceasefire, but there continues to be Iranian control and throttling of the Strait of Hormuz, which is driving prices and threatening the world economy, as well as raising the cost of living for everybody here in our country. I see it in Connecticut, the anger and frustration. So I think the talks have been unavailing, but the bottom line here is that the goals now seem to be very much what this president had as a result of Biden negotiations in the JCPOA. None of the goals of the war, whether it's securing the enriched uranium, changing the regime, destroying missile capacity, have been accomplished. And so I think there really is a standstill in the negotiation as the president tries to grapple with this reality that simply won't go away simply because he says what the reality should be.